You are listening to the daily homily for Magdala in the Holy Land.
Many of the Jews who had come to Mary and seen what Jesus had done began to believe in him. But some of them went to the Pharisees and told them what Jesus had done. So the chief priests and the Pharisees convened the Sanhedrin and said, "What are we going to do? This man is performing many signs. If we leave him alone, all will believe in him, and the Romans will come and take away both our land and our nation." But one of them, Caiaphas, who was the high priest that year, said to them, "You know nothing, nor do you consider that it is better for you that one man should die instead of the people, so that the whole nation may not perish." He did not say this on his own, but since he was high priest for that year, he prophesied that Jesus was going to die for the nation. And not only for the nation, but also to gather into one the dispersed children of God. So from that day on, they planned to kill him. So Jesus no longer walked about in public among the Jews, but he left for the region near the desert to a town called Ephraim, and there he remained with his disciples. Now the Passover of the Jews was near, and many went up from the country to Jerusalem before Passover to purify themselves. They looked for Jesus and said to one another as they were in the temple area, "What do you think? That he will not come to the feast?" The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ. Just to give a little context to the Gospel, we're in chapter 11 of John's Gospel, and this is following the resurrection of Lazarus. And so the first line, in order to grasp its meaning, many of the Jews who had come to Mary, that's the sister of Lazarus, and seen what Jesus had done, began to believe in him. So this Mary and her sister Martha, we had her voice today as the theme of this wonderful women's encounter, a beautiful title, Her Voice. And if we consider how Lazarus was brought back to life, it was because of her voice, the voice of Lazarus' sisters, who sent word to Jesus, "The one you love is sick." And then they sent word to Jesus that he had passed. And there we have two grieving women, sisters for their deceased brother. And so this is the previous passage to the gospel we just read, which then enters a whole area of conflict. But let's go back first to Ezekiel. And we know the prophets, all the major prophets, are temporarily located in the time of the exile, either preparing for God's dealing with that moment of very serious corruption in the chosen people, or then in the exile itself, building their hope for a future. And we find many hard words in the scriptures for human behavior, but the hard words are never alone. Even in Genesis chapter 3, at the time of the fall, the words come with a promise. You have to get out of the Garden of Eden, but the woman's heel will crush the serpent. The seed of the woman will crush the serpent's head. So there is always hope for the human being, no matter how bad the situation is. And that's probably the source of the greatest strength of humanity, is that the future is accompanied by God, who's with us also in our suffering and in this moment of deep infidelity, at the beginning of human history. And there is the perspective that there will be a new future. And this is what Ezekiel articulates. We know that at the time of Solomon, already cracks happened in the porcelain. The pottery would shatter. And this king who sat for 40 years on the throne, I just read a line yesterday from a famous English movie producer, Bear Grylls, and he says that for the human being, it's best not to be too long on the mountaintop. We thrive when we're climbing. we thrive when we're coming out of the valleys. You have lots of valleys in Austria and lots of mountaintops, but you can be up on the mountaintop for a while, you can take your picture, you can do your meditation, but it's the climb is where we're really formed and built. And we're oftentimes in very deep valleys. Even though I go through a dark valley, I fear no evil, that beautiful psalm. And so he casts this vision that the disunity, the brokenness, the civil war that happened in the people after Solomon, after this time of initial corruption at the top, that becomes a deep split of the people, mutual hatred. In that sense, also the word Jews is vis-a-vis the northern kingdom, because they're Judeans, Jews. Then this hostility, interior hostility, this brokenness is going to be healed. This is the promise Ezekiel is offering from God. It's a prophetic word. It's a word of comfort. He's God's spokesman, and God is saying, I want to heal your brokenness. This is an amazing promise. And again, we will have a Davidic descendant as prince over them. And we will have a new covenant. And there's much said about the new covenant in the prophets, a covenant in the heart, written not on tablets of stone, but in the heart. The outpouring of the Holy Spirit. My dwelling shall be with them, God with us, Emmanuel. I will be their God, and they shall be my people. And you know, this is also the language of marriage, of man and woman. You are mine, I am yours. And the beautiful formula of marriage celebration declares unconditionality of love. No matter what the conditions are, health, wealth, whatever situations, there is fidelity for life because love transcends. And this is the love springing from God himself, this healing that God gives. This is the future for humanity. In the worst situations we have with so many conflicts raging now around the globe, we have to keep our eyes open for the healing of humanity. There is healing promised. The Lord will guard us as a shepherd guards his flock. This beautiful text is actually not a psalm. It is a psalm, but it's not the book of Psalms. This is from Jeremiah. So we have canticles peppered throughout the entire scriptures, and that's one of them. The Lord will guard us like a shepherd guards his flock, which we also see in that Psalm 23. And then we come back to John's Gospel to finish up, and we have all these people coming out to Bethany on the eastern side of the Mount of Olives to see Lazarus risen from the dead. They're friends of Mary and Martha. And this obviously concerns the leadership very much. And here we have the Caiaphas, the high priest, who is speaking with an authority as high priest, and he is probably impatient with the discussion of the Sanhedrin, and he declares it's necessary for somebody to die instead of the people. It's an amazing line, and he intended it maybe in one way materially, but from a Christian perspective, reading it, it becomes the meaning of Jesus' death. He died for the people. He didn't die just as a victim. He died out of love. So much did God love us that he gave his only Son to die for us, to endure that horrendous suffering. And again, that readiness of love, that total love, what we discover in all of this is God is so committed to us. God is unlimited in his commitment to us. One of our biggest doubts, when we're a little bit hurt, when we are a little bit self-centered, we doubt about the other. And it's very hard for us to rebuild trust. And we even doubt about God. Well, God knows much better. You can eat from that fruit of that tree. So we doubt. We're susceptible. We're suspicious. We are unwilling to really believe that there is definitive love. And this is the great offer here. And the thought that came this morning, early in the morning in prayer, we talked about it in the live streams in the morning, is what attitude do we have to Caiaphas? And I'm not sure if I'm fair to Christian opinion worldwide, but maybe it is very negative. He was the bad guy. And the question then that came up was, how would Jesus relate to Caiaphas? How would he relate to Pontius Pilate? And it cannot have been anything but blessing. When on the Mount of Beatitudes, Jesus said, we need to bless our persecutors. Pray for those who persecute us. Do good to those who do us evil. It's not a theory. It's not a political philosophy. It's not a social philosophy. It's his life. And he could only wish the best for Caiaphas. This is an amazing thought. And then makes Holy Week very practical for us as we enter Holy Week now, to remember whom do we hold and harbor amazing negativity toward at this moment. And to try to let God pour into our hearts a little bit of his love that wants to redeem every single one made in his image.
Thank you for joining us today. If you want to learn more about Magdala, follow us on YouTube and on Facebook.